Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast from the Too Many Guys Soccer Network. I'm here. I am Chelsea Mike. I am joined this evening by Professor Matt. We're going to be talking Eastern European football. Professor Matt, what's going on?
Nothing much, Chelsea. Mike, congratulations to your Philadelphia Eagles. Go Birds.
Go
Uh,
Birds.
and yeah, this is going to be the new format for the Eastern European report. You have a Kabasi Posse takeover, as well it should be. And yeah, I'm looking forward to, sitting down with you tonight, Mike.
Yeah, of course. If you don't know, my last name, as it will appear on your screen, is Mike for Chelsea Mike. But my actual last name is Shustak. There's a Z in there. So I'm looking forward to a couple of great podcasts with you talking about Eastern European football. So much stuff happening in the world, so much stuff going on in all of the soccer world too, Champions League and stuff going on. It's nice to take a break and take a look at everything else that's going on in the world of soccer. So, Matt, why don't we start it out tonight? A favorite of the show. Um, the Kazakhstan League kicked off over the weekend.
Yes, it
What are your thoughts on the season that'll be upcoming?
Well, it's like it's the old Soviet spring through autumn calendar, so it literally has begun again. I watched one match over the weekend, a really entertaining 1-1 draw. Last season's champions Kairat versus the kind of plastic club of Kazakh football, Astana. Uh, right, and it was a really entertaining match. By the way, all of these matches can be seen for free, well, as long as you have cable or the internet on YouTube. So that's good. And I have been told that they're trying to get English language commentary because apparently there are more than just my crazy ass watches it. Uh,
So
it
wait, so is it only Kazakh? What language are you watching it?
So I usually tune in on the Russian broadcast. It's Kazakh and Russian. Uh, And, I get to practice my Russian a little bit, so that's not too bad. One of the benefits of that league is the officiating makes entirely more sense than, let's say, it does in England. So, like, when there's VAR calls, the refs have to explain how they reached the conclusion they got, and they explain bilingually, both in Kazakh and Russian, which I think is quite nice. Uh,
Yeah. Imagine if we could get the EPL refs to just say it in one
Just say
language.
it in one language. That'd be amazing. It was a pretty interesting first match week. It's interesting. The league is grown even since I've been paying attention to it for the last 4 or 5 years now. Some of that has to do with the impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and Russian players wanting to get the hell out. Talk more about that in a second. Going to Kazakhstan, but also like younger players from throughout the Soviet space that would probably have gone to either Ukraine or Russia, probably going to Kazakhstan because you're going to get paid. There's natural gas money flowing, and you're not playing in a war zone or for a club that will not see European football in who knows how long. So there's a recognizable top four now. There's Kairat, which is the established Soviet era club. Astana, the team that everybody hates, unless I guess you live in Astana. Uh, Akobe and Ordobashi. So there's like a legitimate big four. And there some interesting moves were made over the because this league and the Belarus league, they do so much of their business actually in January because it's the transfer window before the start of the season. Couple names to keep in mind. Louis Mate, left wing forward, signed for Kairat. Name may not seem familiar, but he is a former Porto Youth Academy player. So I think he was playing in the Portuguese second division, was gobbled up. He's still relatively young. He's 22. Uh, and then a guy who I'm familiar with, and actually the podcast is probably familiar with too, but you don't know it. A center back by the name of Gabby Kike signed for Akobe actually on deadline day. The only reason I know this guy existed was he was on the Sheriff Tiraspol team that beat Real Madrid in the Champions League. And from that moment on, every transfer window, he was casually linked with Dynamo Kiev. So I just kept hearing that name, hearing that name. He's in Kazakhstan now as well. So I think we're gonna, and we'll be revisiting the Kazakh League, as we, go on with this series. There's a legitimate top four, and my money would be on Kairat winning the league again, but I think you're going to actually have a legitimate title race. It came down to the last 2 weeks last season, so we'll see. Uh, a transfer, as we're talking about transfers that wasn't made in January, but probably is going to happen in June, might tip the scales in Kairat's favor, however. Artem Zhuba, the former number 9 for the Russian national team, and the guy who I always referred to as homeless Slavic man Olivier Giroud, I think that's a legit, analogy. Uh, he apparently came perilously close to going to Kairat in the January window, and from everything I'm hearing, it's a lock he's going to be plying his trade in Kazakh football come June. Uh, so that's interesting, especially because Kairat, their number 9 is Mike. You may remember him because he's played pretty much everywhere in Europe. Elder Santana, the Brazilian striker. You probably remember him
Name
in
rings a bell.
passing. He's one of those guys where it's just like, oh yeah, I remember him from this club. Yeah, he's played pretty much everywhere. He wants to samba back into the sunset and go back to Brazil. So Juba is of a similar kind of build, sort of similar skill set, and similar age, right? They're now both in their like early, heading into their mid 30s.
Yeah, I mean, no, Juba was born in the Soviet Union.
Mhm.
Juba's a guy who's been around.
Yeah. And right, last I heard of Juba, he was playing in Turkey. It was about a year or so ago. And I didn't know this. He's back in Russia playing for something called Akron Toladi, uh, which just shows you how much I don't give a shit about that league anymore. So I've never heard of this club. I
I
remember
mean,
I remember Lada Toladi, that was owned by the company, the car manufacturer. They were in the Russian Premier League in the 90s, but I don't know this club.
I'm not necessarily certain if it's the same club, if they've just changed their name or maybe been absorbed
That's quite
or
possible.
something. But where they make the lot is pretty much in Kazakhstan anyway.
Yes,
So he was just getting, he's just getting
he's
his
getting
his
his
bags
bearings.
closer
Yeah,
so that
it is in the Samara region, which indeed is right by Kazakhstan. Uh, and yeah, so it looks like he's out of contract in June, and it looks like that's going to be a done deal. And look, I mean, obviously, every since the events, we have had a very complicated relationship with Russian football. But like I've said before, my beef is with those assholes in the Kremlin and the people that go along with them, not per se the athletes themselves, unless you're Alexander Ovechkin and find new and unusual ways to kiss Vladimir Putin's ass. Uh, I wish Juba well. He was always a guy who I always sort of liked, and I sort of always felt bad for him because he was Valery Karpin when he was the manager of Spartak Moscow. Do you remember this story, Mike?
well, keep going.
Okay, so it was early on in Juba's career, and for whatever reason, Valery Karpin, if he didn't like you, he just didn't like you. So he accused Juba of jacking up a fellow teammate's car and stealing 500 rubles, and that's why you didn't see him the rest of the year. 500 rubles, by the way, is like $50. I don't think a promising young striker would go jack up some dude's car. And when I said jack up, the thing was messed up to steal $50. That just seems like, I don't know, bullshit to me. So I've always
Yeah,
I was
I've definitely heard this story.
mhm.
I have definitely heard this story, and yeah, it's a good one. you're right. I mean, not really credible, although I'm not exactly familiar if he's a child of the street and he just his ways couldn't be changed. But that's anyway, all throughout all of sports, whenever you hear that story about the person making, millions of dollars, or probably what Juba was making hundreds of thousands of dollars, they're not gonna they know better than that. Those guys crash out so early they don't.
Yep, yep, yep. Uh, that pretty much wraps up all I need to say about Kazakhstan, at least for the moment. There's no, Mike.
Well, so yeah, let me ask you a question. All right. So Kairat, Astana, they kind of go back and forth. Ordubasi, uh, won one in there in the last couple of years. Is there is there any team that you think can honestly catch Kairat or Astana
It would
as this Kazakh season begins?
or Debasi, simply because the core of that team from 2 seasons ago is still sort of there, and they're kind of the under 21 Kazakh national team in disguise. Uh, but no, I don't really see many surprises. One club I will say that I think is going to punch above their weight is newly promoted Turvan. They've complete they've done what a lot of newly promoted teams don't do. They kept enough of the core that got them to the first division, but they made some smart signings. And I, some of the names, if you've paid attention to post-Soviet football like I have, some of the names they picked up are familiar. Let's just say that. Uh, for a team that just got promoted, I can see them finishing mid-table. I think that's about all they can do. But usually in the Kazakh league, the two teams that come up go right back down because the gap in quality is significant. So I think you might see that trend get bumped this year.
Yeah. All right. So let's go from one league on the ex-Soviet schedule to another. We'll flop over here to Belarus, which will be beginning in the upcoming week. Matt, is anybody going to stop Dynamo Minsk?
Most likely no. Dynamo Minsk has,
I mean, that's pretty easy.
yeah, no, they've done a really fantastic job of youth development, and they've taken advantage because even though they don't get into the Champions League group stages, they get far enough in the playoffs where they get a payoff. They've taken advantage of that money and done some really good scouting. There's a little African core of players there. Uh, and right when these guys do get noticed, like Morozov, who's now in Portugal, they sell these guys off for a profit. Uh, so I don't necessarily see I three in a row in any sport is hard. Go ask the Chiefs. Uh, but I don't the only serious contender I can see is Torpedo Bellas. And that is, talking about like national teams in disguise. Their strategy is, well, I'm just gonna like recreate two-thirds of the Belarus national team here and let's see what happens. But no, I mean,
Yeah, also called the Bayern Munich model.
yes, that is precise. It is the Bayern Munich model fracture settings. I don't really see anyone seriously challenging. Dynamo Brest uh a couple years ago had a pretty decent squad because remember Diego Maradona had some weird connection with them. Uh and
There were did he
the,
sign with them for something and
yeah,
it was like fake or so? Yeah, it
he
was.
was
Yeah,
sort of the sporting director briefly, kind of, sort of. But there was a Latin American contingent there. Most of those guys have been sold off. Uh, and yeah, there's not really, I don't really see a bona fide challenger. Now, injuries can happen. We've seen this certainly in the Premier League. Uh, so I mean that's possible, but if I was a betting man, I think Dynamo does three in a row. I think the gap in quality even between them and Torpedo Bellas is fairly significant. Uh, the real story in the Belarus League, as far as I'm concerned, is because Belarus was the only show in town during COVID. So people, particularly people who followed, Eastern European game, picked a team, and I picked the bizarrely named Belarus Tire. Uh,
See, so he's frozen to me.
you froze.
Yep. All right, there you're back.
Okay, we're back. We're back.
Yeah, yeah, you're back.
We're
I
having
so I
we're
I'm
having
just
storms in the Philadelphia area. My
I,
apologies.
I'm just wondering if that's going to play out like it does on the main show with you, like
It's
you know.
it's quite possible. Uh, but anyway, for me, one of the biggest stories is, or the thing that I'm looking forward to is, again, during COVID, we all picked a random team from the one league that was still going on, and I picked the absurdly named Belarus Tire. Belarus Tire are Belarusian Norwich. We go up, we go down. Well, we're up again. Do we avoid relegation? That for me is my story of this current Belarusian league. And in terms of transfers, again, nothing really big. Again, Torpedo Bella signed literally half of the uh, Belarusian national team.
You know, I mean that's one way to go about it. Belarus obviously has sanctions on them, so there's going to be some restrictions as to what they could do, who they could pull from
Exactly.
Africa,
And
CIS.
even though they are playing in European competitions, like they haven't been canceled, it is kind of as close to playing in Russia, not playing in Russia. So yeah, I mean it, and that's again where I think Donald Minsk has a bit of a upper leg there because they have been able to recruit foreign players. They have that, like I said, that African core, and some decent homegrown guys mixed in. So, and they've been there before. They've done this.
Yeah. Well, let's switch from one side of the new Iron Curtain.
Yes.
Let's go. Let's go immediately south, and we'll silently ponder what side of the Iron Curtain we live on these days, and talk about the Ukrainian League. So we're coming back from winter break. Uh, long, long winters deserve long breaks. Dynamo Kiev were leading at the break. The what seemingly perpetual champion Shakhtar 8 points off the
We'll talk
lead
about
there.
them. Yeah.
And but in the middle of them, Alexandria. So first of all, you're a Kiev guy.
Yes.
I mean, first of all, how great is this season for you? And second of all, what would ruin it for you? What will ruin it for Kiev?
Well, what would ruin it is Shakhtar, their yearly deal with Satan kicks in, usually around April, and they run the table, and we find unusual ways to mess it up. Uh, it's been sort of bittersweet because as good as we have been, this is a good team, probably the most balanced Dynamo Kiev side I've seen in a while. But part of our success is also partially tied to why Shakhtar is 8 points off. And that's a symptom of the very real financial constraints of the game in a war zone. Uh, One of the reasons we've been so good is because, and this is a part of that Soviet legacy, we were the biggest club in the Republic for jump to the point that the reason I'm a Dynamo Kiev fan, I've mentioned this on the pod, I think once or twice before, is my old ass Ukrainian grandfather got a satellite dish in the late 80s, and he was able to get the then Soviet Premier League on his television. And he sat me down and he was watching Dynamo Kiev playing someone, and he was like, "We root for these guys because Ukraine doesn't have a team, but this is the Ukrainian team." This is effectively the Ukrainian national team not being the Ukrainian national team.
Yeah,
Um,
and very much too. We were talking about in the Kazakh league. Like, that was like that was Kyra. Kyra was
Iraq.
said the Kazakh that they were the Kazakh national team.
Yes, precisely.
Yep.
So Dynamo has always been able to recruit the best homegrown talent. Shakhtar's rise began when an oligarch man bought the team under slightly shady circumstances, pumped money in, and started buying 18-year-old Brazilians who were really good. And then he sold them to Western European clubs for a profit, and he got more 18-year-old Brazilians. Right. And everyone's club in England has, in some way, shape, or form, either profited. In the case of, Chelsea, hey, Willian was pretty freaking good. Let's be real.
Yep.
Or in the,
William's still good. He was out there
yeah.
kicking it in the FA Cup this week for Fulham.
Uh, if you're Man United, not so much, Fred. But like the thing remains, they always were able to turn a profit. That cycle of young Brazilians has dried up because they can go and play in Spain or Portugal, what have you, and not play in a war zone. Uh, and that has really kind of hurt them. And I think one of the most shocking transfers during the window was when they sold off actually one of their few promising homegrown talents, Danielo Sekan, to a club in Turkey for what seemed like peanuts, and I was like, okay, this is a cash grab. Uh, and you look, I know we say this every transfer window. Sudakov is going to get sold in the summer. He has to. He can't stay in Ukraine no more. I'm sorry. Uh, he has to go for his own sake. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. I am thrilled that we are kind of walking the league. On the other hand, I understand the reason we're walking the league is directly tied to the land of my forebears, fight for survival.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most amazing things about the run that Shakhtar has been on is that well before the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the full-scale invasion, there was the low-key invasion of Ukraine. Shakhtar's been displaced since 2014.
Yes, they've been a straight up refugee club for
They're
over
a
a
refugee
decade.
club and have been playing everywhere
Yeah,
for the last 11 going on 11 years now. So the fact that they've been able to keep it together and keep their team together, literally, I'm not talking about because, I'm a Dnipro fan.
they
They
don't
just straight up
exist.
disappeared, man.
Yeah,
They're just straight up gone.
they're legit gone. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad I'm glad you segued into that because that's sort of my larger fear. I mean, the longer this war devolves and keeps going, and it looks like the Eastern European version of the Iraq-Iran war, which when it all started was like, other than the fact that the only thing less worse than Putin winning that would be awful would be this. The more I fear for the health of the game in Ukraine. Uh, because the Ukrainian League, for me, at its height, was like 2002 to about the initial Russian aggression, 2014, where you had a bona fide top four of Dynamo, Shakhtar, Dnipro in its original form, and Metalist Kharkiv. Metalist Kharkiv has gone bankrupt. There's now two of them, neither of whom play in the Premier League. There's no club in Dnipro at the moment, which is so sad because talk about a football obsessed city, and a city where football has a real pedigree. I'm genuinely worried the longer this goes, what Ukrainian football is going to look like in 2 or 3 years.
Well, so one thing, a reason I was a fan of Dnipro was because where I studied abroad, Ukraine, Western Ukraine, there weren't really teams. The teams were all in Eastern Ukraine. They were all down in the Donbass, um, out in Luhansk. And you look at the league this year. There's Shakhtar Donetsk, which is fake.
Not in the, yeah,
You go down Kryvyi is on it's on the river. There's Lviv. There's a team in Rivne. You know, there's Zhytomyr. These are cities that did not have Ukrainian Premier League sides
exactly.
when I was there.
And
And
as
and now I mean, of course there is part of that any team from the Donbass that would like to play in the Ukrainian league would not be allowed to at this point. Um, they're effectively severed um, from Ukraine,
and when
but
and when you were over there, certainly when I was over there was at least one or two Crimean teams in the Premier
yes,
League. And obviously
yeah,
they've been out of the equation now for over a decade.
yeah. I think there was a Simferopol team
Yes.
that was good. But yeah, they've been out. They've been so yeah. I mean, part of it is, and the stadiums are smaller. The cities are smaller. Outside of Lviv, cities like Luhansk, um, and of course, those are just way bigger cities than what
Mhm.
you're. So yeah, for the game, for the spectator aspect, I know living in a war zone is always going to be iffy about wanting to go to a football match, but um, that said, yes, the size of the markets, if you will, of these towns, the size of the stadiums they're playing in will be smaller. And yeah, no, I share your concerns about the future.
But we march on. Uh Hopefully by both Catholic and Orthodox Easter, which fall on the same day this year, I can be
Oh,
celebrating a Dynamo championship. But
the,
we'll cross that bridge once we get there.
oh, is Easter the last day of the season?
No, no,
Yeah,
no. But it's sort of
yeah. I was like, that'd be early.
no, that would be early, but the way that I look at it, if we just do what we have to do and Shakhtar just drop a couple points, that puts us in a pretty good place. And that's the thing with Shakhtar this season. They are wildly unpredictable. Uh they either beat you down or they lose 1-0.
Professor Matt and I over here, great Polish American Catholics. I I have to look up. I didn't do it. I could have, but I have to look up what day Easter is. So,
Oh,
making Grandpa proud, making Grandpa proud up there.
well, we had a wedding, which I don't think we're going to now on Good Friday. That's the only reason I know. And it's the
Oh,
last full week of my semester. So
oh, well, there you go. Late must be a late Easter
it is the
this
last
year,
weekend. It's the last weekend of the month.
right? I hate that. I hate late Easter. I like the early one myself. Again, not for any of the purposes it's really there for. For me, it's like when do I get this ham? You know,
Ah, and
I
speaking
like deviled eggs.
of Polish Catholics, I learned my lesson last year. I'm getting my kibasi early. Going to
You
Port
got
Richmond and getting the kibasi on Good Friday seems like a good idea, but it's flawed.
you gotta have a hookup. My grandparents were members of St. Peter and Paul's Catholic Church here in Plains, Pennsylvania for their entire lives. So I got a lot of good hookups in the kielbasa world.
Okay.
Let me know. Let me know. You're not that far away.
All right.
And my sister lives down there anyway. She needs it too.
I may take you up on that, Mike.
All
See,
right.
this is the Too Many Guys soccer show, and also apparently black market or gray market kibasi dealings.
Kielbasa. I got the kielbasa. You need the kielbasa. Yeah, I'm here. You're there. We get the things. We get other
Uh,
things. All
Oh,
right, let's talk about one more thing tonight, Professor Matt. Let's talk about one more thing. Where why limited to just Eastern Europe? Let's talk about the whole of Europe. I think there's two things. Actually, let's lead off here with the counterintuitive thing. Since it's happening tomorrow and it'll be prime, let's talk about the Polish teams in the Conference League. And not just Polish, there's teams from all over Eastern Europe in the Conference League.
so
So let's,
I like this because we're beginning with the positive. Uh,
yes, start with the,
yes.
let's end on a nice negative note so
Yeah,
everyone goes home
let's begin with
stat.
the positive. So when the Conference League was initially branded a couple years ago, I was like, okay, this is cool because a lot of these clubs in places and in leagues that I am interested in are going to have legitimate puncher's chances. The Champions League, as we know, has been slowly sort of drifting into the Super League for a while now.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that more.
Yes, yes, we will. So the Conference League is kind of that like neat little saving thing, and I really enjoy it. And this season in particular, because and shame on us, both being Polish Catholics. The Polish league is a league we don't talk enough about on this show. And there's a reason for that. It's one of the harder ones to actually watch, right? Like the Kazakh league figured out, oh, if we just put this stuff free on YouTube, randos and immigrant people will watch it. And indeed,
Yeah.
that we do. The Polish league, unless you live in a Polish neighborhood and you have a bar that has a satellite dish, good luck trying to find that without the services of the special antenna. Uh, ESPN for a while there. Do you remember they had rights to the Polish Cup?
I do not.
It
And
was
like I watch a lot of soccer, man. I did not see that.
it was a brief weird time, and I would make a point to at least watch the final every year. And then they got rid of it because it was just me and again a bunch of immigrant dudes in like Port Richmond or like Chicago.
Well,
The,
it was so no, it's a bunch of people. Where I'm from, we are the only plurality Polish American county in the United
you
States.
had mentioned this when someone stole a the air pump.
Yeah, yeah. Someone stole the tip of the air pump from a gas station that connects it to your tire. Yeah, and I was like, well, what would the Germans say? Because that's what they think of us is that
Yes,
we
exactly.
just steal stuff.
These stu-
And I'm like, someone did not rise above our stereotypes. And it hurt me. So thanks.
They,
Thank you, brother.
it's one guy. They do not represent us. Uh,
No, they don't represent
they do
us as
not represent us. But Poland is well represented in the knockout stages. You
they
have
are.
Legia Warszawa versus Moldova, uh, and Bialystok, the club of my family's stomping grounds against Seka Bruges. These are winnable draws. They really are. These are winnable ties. Uh,
Yeah,
Mo
Mulda the Norwegian team, who I've got to say I'm more familiar with Norwegian women's football than I am Norwegian men's
I think
football.
that makes sense. And the only reason I know they exist is because that's where Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, aka Golem, was managing before Man United was like, come back home. Uh, so
Yes, and obviously Mulda prepared him well
exact
because
yes.
because he's been the most successful manager there in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And they hated him. They hated him the whole time. They wanted him out the whole time. Shout out to our good friend host Mike.
Yes. Uh so it's kind of been fun. It's been an interesting ride, and this is exactly why I was excited about the Conference League. Clubs like Liga Warszawa, like Bialystok, uh, like the second or third team in the Czech League, they're going to get European knockout football. And even if they don't win the damn thing, which they probably won't, the longer you live, the more money you get, the more hype, the more, signings and stuff you can bring in. It's good for the game.
Yeah, I mean, so there's other clubs too from Eastern Europe. There's there's Borats
Yes.
who are from Bosnia. Um, and there's Celia from Slovenia
Slovenia.
who will also be playing tomorrow. So yeah, no, I mean it's been a great geography lesson because I'm a Chelsea fan, of course, Chelsea Mike, as you can see in the screen and here. That's a Sam Kerr jersey, by the way. I'm proud of the women and not the men. Um, but you're getting to see teams you never would have rightly heard
Yeah.
of in the old Prem, Europa League Champions League setup because these teams used to play in games that maybe they would stream online, but you'd never see them in the TV matchups in a Europa League or a Champions
And
League. No,
most of
I like it too. I
and
like the
most of the
format, and
team
it's inviting new fans in and making. But Panathinaikos won last year. They never won anything in Europe before.
exactly.
It's making new champions, so I
Exactly.
think that's great for the game.
Exactly. I can't I love the conference league.
I do too. Hopefully Chelsea win. But if not, my family is from Kropyvnytska, which is just a few miles east of Białystok in the old Pale. So, you know, uh, if I can't pull for Chelsea, I've got Białystok with me. But
You
you'd
got
mentioned Matt, you'd mentioned that you you didn't really think the new Champions League format was good for Eastern European teams. Why is that?
so and let's be real. The last time a Eastern European team posed a serious threat in the Champions League was vintage Shevchenko, Rebrov, late 90s Dynamo Kiev. But we've seen, CSKA Moscow got to the quarterfinals a couple times under Leonid Slutsky. Uh, you know, but what we have seen in the Champions League, even just up until a couple years ago, was in the old format when you were guaranteed to play everybody home and away. And you were guaranteed to play, there was at least one home match awarded these smaller sides. You saw these crazy upsets, right? The one that we talk about in this pod constantly is Sheriff, obviously. But, Beta
I
Borisov,
it doesn't make me feel good to talk about it. I'm not. It's like I'm not proud of Sheriff.
no, no, it's
Nothing about Tiraspol
it's a
makes me happy.
club. It's a club that exists in a country that doesn't exist, owned by the Russian Moldovan mob, who may have been the people that I used to buy cigarettes from, but that's another story.
I
Uh,
definitely did too.
yes, a lot of people did. Uh,
Yes,
a lot of
it was
people
a good
did,
racket. I used to sell them on campus for profit.
but
Sorry, ATF.
but Beta Borisov beating Bayern Munich. Uh and if you want to go back far enough, host Mike would probably have blocked this. Man United got knocked out of the Champions League by something called Rotar Volgograd. Uh, because they had to go to frickin' Volgograd in like November, and play in front of a bunch of angry, drunk Russians in a Soviet era concrete dome that moved. Uh, you know,
I mean, this is the difference between host Mike and host Chelsea Mike. Host Chelsea Mike will celebrate those wins,
so I
celebrate those victories. Honestly, you know what? If Białystok or Legia Warszawa beat Chelsea, I would still be like I'd be proud. I wouldn't be happy, but I'd be proud.
yeah, So I don't think you're going to see those kind of crazy, upsets in the group stage or the league phase now at, anymore. I really don't. The other thing, and this more applies to Ukrainian football than anything else, if you are a league that has a long winter break, the fact that the last two league phase games happened during your winter break is kind of crazy because Shakhtar, before they went on winter break, Shakhtar, to be fair, kind of got themselves in a position where it's like, okay, maybe they can at least make the playoff stage. But then it was like, wait a minute, the last two matches are in January when these guys are just chilling because their season starts at the end of July.
Yeah,
I
so
don't,
so wait, let's draw a contrast here, right? So what you're saying is you think it's more of a disadvantage for teams because Germany also has a winter break. I think Spain kind of does too, but now they do the Super Cup, so it's not really a winter break for
so
the top teams. But but so compare that with the English model where you just play like absolutely constantly throughout that. You think that the English teams have an advantage there,
slightly.
being fresh, being not fresh, being match ready as opposed to being fresh.
Slightly. I do.
Okay.
And I think the longer the winter break is, the German winter break, the Italian winter break, that's Catholic tax. That's like, yo, Christmas has begun, and once wise men show up, we play games again. It's like
Right.
speed.
Yeah. They're not,
In
no, they are no, and notably, again, I lived in Ukraine. When I got there in late January, the temperature the first night I was there in Chernivtsi was negative 16 Fahrenheit,
exactly.
which I believe is negative like 28 Celsius. I forget.
Yeah.
My It's weird that it was presented to me in Celsius and my brain remembered Fahrenheit. But that's, I mean, there's places in the world. We live in the United States. We are on what we would call on this program the Soviet schedule, but you're not going to Minnesota and playing in January.
No.
That would be No one's going to come out and watch it. That would be
Yeah.
hell.
That would be psychotic, and that's
Yeah,
exactly what it sort of is. And it's it's the fact that that is that long winter break and long winter tune-up. And again, because so much of the transfer business, like January is kind of a slow transfer window everywhere in Europe, except in the East.
right.
And so you like in the case of Shakhtar, it's like, okay, they had to sell Seacom. And so the only recognized striker they had in those two matches was Lissana Torore. And we know he sucks. But so like it was just like, okay, so they didn't because ultimately they did bring in a young Brazilian to be the replacement. But like you didn't even have the replacement in. I I I haven't made up my mind fully how I feel about the new UCL format in its totality, but I'm going to say this. I don't think we're going to see many of these weird Cinderella stories or even as many of these weird one-off uh upsets. Like,
I'm gonna disagree with you. And I'm gonna use sort of two examples. For one thing, I think that we talk about the sheriff upset, and it was a great upset. I mean, I enjoyed watching the upset, even if I didn't like the team. But they then lost the reverse fixture at
yes,
home in Tiraspol to Real Madrid. That's that's the other part of it. If they had just pulled that one off win in that moment and then not been just beaten by them back at their own place, I kind of feel like it's even more iconic in that way. If you get to your one off, since we're playing six different teams as opposed to three teams twice, I feel like you've got more of a chance to just go in and one off. a legend for your club, and you don't have to face the backlash of um oh well, we killed you in the reverse fixture, but because like you can say forever, yeah, we beat you, mate. Like you were you're Real Madrid, we were Sheriff, we beat you. If that was only that one match, you'd have that forever. You'd have that forever. And then you could say, well, you could say back, well, no, without a reverse fixture, well, you didn't beat us. So yeah, we're better than you.
That's
We're
that
way better than you. That's how chants come about.
that I'll say that is something I didn't necessarily think about. And yeah, there is something to that. There is some
So let Matt, so Matt, I've got a second thing here. And this is me. I am going to throw your words against you here. Um, for this. I'm going to convince you. Uh, I'm going to convince you. So there were 24 teams make the playoff stage of the new Champions League, right? So they expanded it from a hard 16 to now there's 24 with this intermediate leg. Look, there's an intermediate leg in the NBA now that they've put in. Nobody likes it, but it makes more meaningful games for more teams. That's why it's there. Don't get it twisted. Okay. But so team number 25 on this year's uh, Champions League table in the first year of doing this was none other than Dinamo Zagreb. Right. So we're an Eastern European football podcast, right? Dinamo Zagreb last year we were berating because who were they going to lose the league to? It was
kind of split.
yeah, it was Split. Yeah, and then they didn't. They somehow had like a miracle comeback and
Well,
they won the league again.
split just Dortmund did. So
Yeah.
yeah,
They just kind of they right down there at the end of the year. But we talked about how we I there was a focus on this podcast about the crashing of Dinamo Zagreb. This is the team that was the first one out. So the teams below them out. I know Shakhtar's. It's not a Shakhtar, right? Like Shakhtar, it might not be a Shakhtar year for the next 30 years. Like, unfortunately, no matter what happens in the world situation, you know. But the other teams below that, with like a team that we on an Eastern European soccer podcast just shit on constantly was the first team out. I don't I don't think there's a Western European bias there. I think that just the teams this year that made it, they weren't as good. Sparta Prague, do we want them there? But you know,
you haven't totally convinced me, but I'm willing to revisit this. I want to revisit this time next year because you're right. It may have just been a bad group. You know, it,
it's going to be, the thing about this new format is it all comes down to your draw, no matter what. I
mhm.
mean, even if you're Champion City or your Real Madrid perpetual champions, if you get if you get all the big teams and that's what fate has decided for you, it's going to be harder for you. And if you've got there's like, let's be honest, you can put them 1 through 32 at the beginning of it, and you could probably put them into at least four separate groups. And if everyone you pull is from that fourth group, it doesn't matter if you're Real Madrid or you're one of the teams in the fourth group, you're going to have a better chance.
That
It
is
does it does all come down to the draw now. I
and
mean,
it's funny because I remember at the beginning of the initial draw, and I remember talking to Celtic Cam and being like, "Well, you guys lucked out." And then I was going down, and Slovan Bratislava, the Slovak, and I remember just being like, "Oh, they're screwed." Like, how did they get this particular draw? Like, there's not a winnable match I see. So there's something to be said about that. And like I said, I'm very willing to revisit this because I still haven't fully made up my mind how I think about this new format. Uh, Again, the whole if you have a legit winter break, I don't think this is necessarily conducive. But vice versa, if you took care of business before you went on winter break, okay. So again, I'm up in the air. I'm leaning more towards I don't know if we're gonna see what we used to see, but I don't know. This is only the first year, and again, Dinamo Zagreb, they're on a little bit of a decline. This, like I said, this isn't Shakhtar's year, and again, I go back to wow, Slovan Bratislava are screwed. Like they were victims of the draw.
You're always, I mean, you know what? If you're a team like the team that you support,
Yeah,
a team whose name I will not mention, and you finish first, like if you're leading your domestic league and you're one of the top five domestic league, it probably really doesn't matter who your draw is, but it certainly helps if you see, whichever team from Cyprus went on a miracle run through the qualifiers,
or just
whatever.
let's just say it, the third best team in France.
Yeah.
You see them, you're happy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, yeah, no, it draws a big part of it. I will say I'm not going to go off and give the new. I think we're on both sides of a very moderate card. We're both intrigued, but I sort of lean towards like it. You sort of maybe lean towards not, but um, I don't think really after 1 year we've got
no,
we've
no,
got
no.
any.
There's too. We are trained historians, Mike. That is way too small a sample size. You have to see this play out somewhere.
Hey, you know what? If Real Madrid don't win for 15 years, this format was a
Oh
grand
no,
success.
I then I'm all in, baby.
Grand success.
Anyway, this was a lot of fun.
It was a very good fun show. I was happy to do it with you.
We're going
You
to
know,
do this again. This is going to be the new format for the Eastern European reports. And I'm thinking about every 3 months or so because, right, there's the beginning of the season, there's the winter cometh, there's, the thaw, which we're doing now. I am Khrushchev. And right,
the thaw is blessed. Let me tell you, it has been really, really cold up in the mountains
I can
this
only
winter.
imagine. And we'll probably get back at the end of the season to recap things, and we'll see if again Juba winds up in the steps. Uh so Mike, would you like to take us away?
Well, for the Eastern European show on the Too Many Guys Network, I'm Chelsea Mike. He was Professor Matt. I think we did okay this week. Try to do better next time.